everyone, and welcome to the Research for Social Impact podcast presented by the Centre for Social Impact at Swinburne University of Technology. My name is Susan Pizzati, and I'm the Principal Industry Fellow in Social Impact here at CSI Swinburne, and I'm delighted to be your host for this series. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are producing this podcast today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. For those of you who may not be familiar with CSI Swinburne, we are a highly industry-engaged, practice-oriented research and teaching centre based in Swinburne School of Business, Law and Entrepreneurship. We are one of 4 university-based nodes of the highly respected CSI National Network, which also includes the University of New South Wales, Flinders University and the University of Western Australia. Throughout this series, we'll be bringing you conversations, interviews and information from our researchers, sector experts, industry partners and even our students and alumni, aligned with our core areas of work, which include social entrepreneurship, social finance and investment, measuring and communicating social impact, community services innovation, and employment service system reform for marginalised groups. On today's episode, we'll be introducing you to one of CSI Swinburne's PhD candidates, Sally McGeoch, whose research is exploring the extent to which cross-sector collaboration can help work integration social enterprises to scale their impact. In addition to her PhD research, Sally works as a senior advisor at the Westpac Foundation, where she's responsible for the design and delivery of grant and capacity building programs that support community organisations and social enterprises to create jobs and employment opportunities for Australians facing complex barriers to work. Sally has worked at the intersection of philanthropy, business and social enterprise for close to 17 years, bringing a real depth of practical experience to her academic research. Hi Sally, it's great to have you with us today.
Hi Susan, thanks so much for having me.
I'm really looking forward to diving into your research today, Sally. But before we start, I'd love to know a little bit more about your story. So can you perhaps talk us through some of your career journey so far?
Yes, of course. I guess I've always really loved the intersection between business and inclusive employment. And for me, that started at a really young age in that I grew up in a family business. It was a wholesale plant nursery. And my parents just created this lovely environment in that family business where they employed a lot of people with disabilities. And my dad also went about setting up a social venture with the women's jail in Brisbane, where he would encourage the women inmates to grow plants and then would buy them back, and he set up sort of a little nursery inside the jail. And so from quite a young age I was exposed to how you can create really inclusive employment environments in businesses, and that sort of was always in the back of my mind. But I kicked off quite a traditional career. My undergraduate studies was in business and communications, but I was always drawn to the for-purpose space and found myself in different corporate roles, always seeking out partnerships with not-for-profits and for-purpose organisations, and then decided to kind of take the leap into that space and worked for a number of different not-for-profits, including Oxfam and the School for Social Entrepreneurs. And the School for Social Entrepreneurs was like a fascinating journey for me. I was there for 7 years when it was set up in Sydney. And over that time, saw about 300 social enterprises establish. And, some of them are names that we probably, most of us know about now, such as Who Gives a Crap, Batir, which is an amazing mental health organisation, and Career Trackers, and gained really interesting insights into sort of what it's like to establish those social businesses and the sort of support that's needed. Yeah, so I've been really fortunate, I guess, to be able to bring that experience into my role at Westpac Foundation, where I'm responsible for funding and capacity building of those organisations, to have all that first-hand experience. And I guess also during that time I was involved in helping to establish the Bread and Butter Project too, which is a really well-known social enterprise in Sydney.
Amazing. So it sounds like this stuff is right in your DNA, Sally, right back from seeing your dad do the work that he was doing. So it's fantastic to hear about that. And it really makes me think about sort of the consistent theme of this podcast that we've had so far has been really about the power of combining practical experience with academic insight. So how do you feel that your work background has informed the development of your research on your PhD?
Yeah, so I've been with the Westpac Foundation for almost 10 years now and directly funding and supporting, as you said, work integration social enterprises. So these are those social enterprises that exist to create employment opportunities for people that face complex barriers to work. And I guess over that period of time, you start to sort of see patterns emerging around the challenges of scale. And one of the areas that I'm really interested in is how social enterprises can better collaborate with business and government. Obviously, sitting within a business, a large corporate like Westpac, there's so many opportunities for businesses to procure from social enterprises. And I just think it was an area that I thought was ripe for further investigation in Australia, because, you know, we're trying to solve a really complex problem here of unemployment, and not one actor can solve that alone. I mean, these social enterprises are doing amazing work, but they really need to work better in with other sector players to get the scale and to kind of shift some of the conditions that are, you know, hindering them from real growth and solving these issues around inclusive employment.
Fantastic. And where are you currently at in the PhD process? Maybe you can give us a bit of an overview of what's been involved in undertaking your PhD so far, because I'm sure there's many people that don't know what that looks like from sort of start to finish.
Yeah. I don't want to frighten anyone off, but it's a long journey, and it's been a long journey for me because I purposely chose to do it while I was working. So the PhD I'm doing is called a practice-based PhD, so I'm drawing on my personal work experience, you know, to really investigate this area of cross-sector collaboration. And so I chose to do it over the full, you know, part-time mode, which is 6 years. So I'm actually in sort of the last year now, which is super exciting. But the first few years were really about spending time doing research workshops at CSI, writing up my research proposal, getting my ethics application in, and then I dedicated 3 years to the data collection process, which is what I always wanted to do, because I'm studying 3 different case studies, which I'll talk about, but I wanted to see how they go about their collaborative work and what's changing over time. And so that was an amazing experience to be an insider researcher in those 3 organisations. And then, since that wrapped up, I've been, spending time obviously on the data analysis and writing it up. But the case studies I've been working with over this period are 3 quite well-known social enterprises in Australia. So Street, which is a hospitality-based enterprise in Melbourne, White Box Enterprises, which is often referred to as an intermediary for the WISE sector, but they also operate a number of WISEs themselves, and Jigsaw, which is a disability social enterprise. They've been just so generous in letting me be a part of their collaborative work for my studies. And I'm really looking forward to sharing more with your listeners about what I've been learning along the way.
Fantastic, and great organisations there, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what you're finding at this point. And sounds like you're really getting to the pointy end of things now, so congratulations for getting through all of that. And as we've mentioned earlier, your research really explores the extent to which cross-sector collaboration can help social enterprises to scale. So can you talk to us a little bit about what some of your key findings have been so far from your research?
Yeah, sure. I think, I'm still kind of working through this with my thesis writing, but if I was to sort of choose maybe 3 areas to talk about that I think would be really interesting for the listeners. And the first thing is really just I feel like we need to think differently about scale. Scaling impact is different to organisational scaling.
Yes.
And I think there's a kind of a dominant paradigm around, if something's working well, a particular social enterprise model, how do we sort of throw more money at that to, expand that and create a big impact for that particular organisation. I mean, that is one way to go, but I think the complex problems that we're solving through these organisations around inclusive employment need to be solved by multiple actors. And so one of the articles which really resonated with me through my literature review was this very simple analysis of the different types of scaling for social enterprises, and it referred to organisational growth versus ecosystem growth. And it's that ecosystem growth that kind of drew me into this research area, because I could see some of these social enterprises collaborating not only with other sectors, but also kind of bringing social enterprises together. And I thought, wow, that's really the way to kind of go about solving some of these complex problems. And ecosystem growth is about how do we indirectly address some of these problems by kind of growing and sustaining a more supportive social enterprise system. So if I was to kind of, I guess, give an example of that, that maybe your listeners might relate to, drawing back to one of my case studies, Street in Melbourne. So Street are a hospitality enterprise, as I mentioned. Their founders, Beck and Kate, had spent 10 years sort of growing Street as a hospitality enterprise with multiple venues, transforming thousands of lives. But they will reflect and say, we've transformed all of those lives, but we have not transformed the system. So they've actually consciously made a shift in their organisation to, continue to grow their enterprise, but also really explore what they can do from a collaborative perspective to change the system. And one of the great initiatives they got up last year is called the Purpose Precinct. The Purpose Precinct is in Melbourne, and it's a fantastic front door of social enterprises in Victoria. It's located at the Queen Victoria Market. And what they've basically done is brought all of these social enterprises from across Victoria, a lot of them in regional areas. I think they've got 80 odd social enterprises retailing from that space. And collectively, they're looking to create 75 jobs through that work. So they've sort of basically created this infrastructure for the Victorian social enterprise sector to get that visibility, to get the sort of engagement with consumers, and there's so many other benefits that have come from that work. So that's the kind of scale I think is super exciting, and that's been the focus of my research. The other area I would say is aggregation is really important for us in the social enterprise sector. And I think this is partly due to historically it being quite underdeveloped and under-resourced sector. So what I've found is that, no one sort of work integration social enterprise necessarily has the bandwidth or the resources to engage in cross-sector collaboration, but by working together, they can do that. And if I was to draw another example from my research, white box enterprises have done that very effectively. They are a couple of years in now to a pilot payment by outcomes trial. Which is pretty cutting edge. It's a trial that they've partnered up with a range of investors and the federal government, and they've brought 17 social enterprises together, and they're being paid for the employment outcomes that they create. And this is a first for the social enterprise sector. And why it's so game-changing, it's something that I've learned a lot about in my role at the Westpac Foundation, is that work integration social enterprises have impact costs. So, they're trying to operate a regular business, whether that's in the waste business or hospitality business, but because they're supporting vulnerable employees, they've got a range of other costs that they incur that traditional businesses would not. So they're providing specialist wraparound support, referral pathways, all to ensure that it's the most inclusive, sustainable, meaningful kind of career pathway for the people that they're supporting. And so it's very hard with these impact costs for these organisations to be scaling or even self-sustaining. And so this opportunity through the federal government to be able to pay for outcomes that they would be paying other employment service providers is really game changing. And they've been getting some amazing results through that trial. And so by aggregating all those social enterprises in a way, they've been able to really amplify the impact of what's possible through work integration social enterprises. And a couple of studies have come out recently which have compared their results to traditional employment services, which shows that, with 52 weeks, close to 70% of employees at these social enterprises are still retained compared to, 26% if they were employed through disability employment services. And then, 98% are talking about having more meaningful careers and lives as a result of these inclusive employment models. So they're generating a lot of fantastic data through this aggregation work. So this kind of trial wouldn't have been possible if one single social enterprise had tried to partner.
Yep.
So I guess it's that thing, the aggregation is really critical, I feel, in Australia to be able to scale. And then I guess the last thing I'd comment on is that, these projects sound really exciting, the White Box PBO, the Purpose Precinct, but if you kind of lift the lid, these have been labours of love for a long time. The point I wanted to make is that we need to be very mindful that collaboration efforts are really complicated. They're slow, they're emergent, and they require a lot of heavy lifting by these social enterprises that are driving this work. I would say it's invisible work. So a lot of the work that happens is behind the scenes. It's not been done before, and they're drawing on their inherent kind of innovative and entrepreneurial sort of traits, these social enterprises, to experiment and try these bespoke models, but it's not often funded and not often well resourced, and the relationships to do this work, because it's quite high risk, take a lot of time to develop. When I was speaking to Street about their Purpose Precinct, this is an amazing piece of infrastructure that Victoria now has, but that was built off the back of possibly 10 years of connections that those organisations had through working together through SENVIC, the social enterprise network in Victoria. So I think it's really important to just keep that in mind, that they don't kind of happen overnight. You need to sort of really invest in the collaborative kind of capacity and infrastructure in order to kind of get to that point. And capacity building is really important when they're bringing in other social enterprises as well, because they often, are under-resourced and need support to be part of those projects.
Fantastic. Some really interesting points there, Sally, and some great examples that you provided for us. And I know you've still got a way to go in your research, so I'm hesitant to ask you to kind of give final findings or anything, but are there some main takeaways from what you're seeing so far you'd like people to think about?
Yeah, and I think it sort of flows from some of those points I made before, which is, think about, and a lot of what I say is a little bit linked to where I sit in, philanthropic organisation as a funder. So the lens I bring is sort of, what other funders possibly could do, from philanthropy or business or government. But yeah, consider backing cross-sector collaborations to drive impact, and really investing in these systems-minded wise leaders to do that kind of innovation and experimentation, to scale through aggregation and cross-sector collaboration. And in order to do that, you really need to kind of have a pretty high risk appetite, be very flexible, allow for things to kind of go in different directions, and, to be in that kind of learning space. And one thing I learned a lot from working with these organisations, that there's a range of different enabling factors that need to be in place for collaboration to occur, like trust building. And so it's important not to kind of put money on the table in order for people to collaborate, but sort of maybe identify where there's trusted relationships and where that might be possible, or wait for those kind of collaborations to emerge and then really get in behind them. And yeah, just to really invest in and encourage ecosystem development from WISE and, other cross-sector partners. I think it's quite a shift And it does require a big shift from social enterprises and their boards to think about not just the sustainability of the individual organisation, but how they can kind of work and support others, and so kind of getting in behind those organisations and supporting them and strengthening a lot of the kind of networks and intermediaries that convene and connect organisations across the sector. So that would be a couple of points, I guess, to mention.
Fantastic. Thank you. And have you thought about sort of more broadly what you're hoping the legacy of your research will be once it's complete and out there in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually gained so much from it myself as a funder, working, in investing in this space, being able to kind of adapt my own practice and influence others around me, to think more about investing in kind of ecosystems. But yeah, I guess that, as I mentioned earlier, is a focus I want to be able to share the impact potential through this study of that work, and encourage people to look at these kind of indirect investments as a really critical part of growing the sector. A funny sort of analogy we used in the research team with my co-researchers was like this metaphor of a fish tank, and it's like you've got these social enterprises as the fish swimming around in this fish tank, but if we're not kind of making sure that enabling environment, the water is clear and in the right condition for them, then they're just going to be swimming in circles and not and not growing and surviving. So yeah, I think we just need to kind of think a bit bigger and broader about impact in the space and what's required to kind of break through some of these barriers for growth. So that's probably, this concept of ecosystem investment, I guess, is hopefully going to be a key takeaway for others in the sector.
That's brilliant. Thank you. You touched on so much there, some really important points and some really interesting stuff coming out of your research so far. And I can't wait to see the finished product, Sally. But for our final question today, and I can't quite believe we're at this point already, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask all of our guests, and that's, if you had an unlimited budget to play with, what's the next piece of research or education that you'd like to see developed in this space?
Yeah, well, I think with research, there's so much more we could do in the social enterprise space. So there's been some really great work done by colleagues at CSI and Melbourne Uni and others, mapping the social enterprise system over time. But we don't have a lot of research on kind of the long-term benefits and impacts of inclusive employment models. And I think, what the impact is for those individuals, but also, we need to think about where those organisations we're hoping for them to transition to, which is mainstream employers as well, and helping kind of bridge that gap. So I think there's potential to look at what some of the benefits are for mainstream employers in working, in this way. And I'm really hoping, I guess, the end of the day, these sort of social enterprise models of inclusive employment really translate into other contexts as well as sort of the way to kind of operate in order to have a more productive, inclusive workplace. So I think there's, a lot that could be researched in that space. But, in terms of education, I feel like that's a bit more of a long game. But it's been really exciting to see over the years the growth in, I guess, school and tertiary education around social impact and social entrepreneurship. Because I think, we need to sort of invest in shifting mindsets around, the importance of, not just focusing on that kind of economic output, but also prioritising people and planet in our models.
Absolutely. Yep.
And, I think it's going to take a bit of a long, slow, gradual shift to get sort of young minds to kind of take on some of these concepts and then really embed those in other sectors to really kind of be the next kind of policymakers and conscious consumers and business leaders. So yeah, we really need to kind of shift what we value, I suppose, ultimately in society. And so yeah, there's some great content out there that people can pick up if they're interested in this concept of people and planet first, and some of the work in that space is covered in a topic called Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth, which is all about sort of redesigning our economic system for a future that meets every person's basic needs while kind of safeguarding the living world on which we all depend. So that was quite a lot of stuff to cover off, but I really believe in education as well as sort of researching what we need for the here and now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sally. You've given us so much to think about, and it's so fantastic to hear all about your journey, where you're at, and hopefully where your research is going. So we really appreciate you sharing all of that with us at this stage in your journey. I'm sure many of our listeners will be really interested in learning more and to be kept up to date as your research progresses. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they'd like some more information?
Definitely LinkedIn. I share a lot of stories on LinkedIn of people in the social enterprise sector doing amazing things. So I think if anyone wants to follow me on LinkedIn, and I do have a range of case studies that I've already written up on those three organisations, Jigsaw, Street and Whitebox, and so they're all available as articles on my LinkedIn. So that's probably the best place to go.
So that brings us to the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed hearing from Sally and learning more about her work. If you're interested in learning more about research like we've discussed today, or perhaps even considering beginning or developing your career in the social impact field, you might be interested in our Graduate Certificate of Social Impact that we offer here at CSI Swinburne. The program is designed to help you to advance your career in social impact, providing you with the skills to lead effectively in a changing social economy and develop innovative responses to complex social and business problems. Our scholarships for 2025 are also now open, with 7 $5,000 scholarships available to students commencing study next year, which is a great opportunity for anyone considering upskilling in the social impact space. For more information, you can contact me or visit the CSI Swinburne website. We'll leave links to my contact details, course and scholarship information in the show notes. Please feel free to contact us with any feedback or suggestions you may have for future topics, or you can always like or leave a review on this episode on Spotify. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you can join us again soon.